Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the fourth of the IOSF World of Otters webinars that we've held over the last 4 years. I'm going to pass you over quickly to Grace Yockton, who is going to introduce the webinar, and then we will proceed from there. So over to you, Grace.
Hello, I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'd just like to say a few words before we start the business of the webinar. As Ben said, this is our fourth webinar, and each time we have such wonderful speakers who tell us about various different aspects of their otter conservation. IOSF started World Otter Day in 2016, and the aim was to raise awareness of the problems faced by otters worldwide. We all know them. It's pollution, hunting, disturbance, loss of habitat, illegal trade, so many different things that the otters face in this world. We're really grateful to everyone present here and those who couldn't make it for helping us to raise that awareness. Every one of you is helping to draw attention to otters and what we can do to protect and conserve them. Now, at the last count, I believe there were people in 47 countries doing stuff for World Otter Day, which is a great achievement. Each year it gets bigger and bigger. And as far as I'm aware, there are 23 countries represented here at the webinar, which is going to have a great impact on worldwide conservation. IOSF has produced a special video, which has been shared through social media, and this shows how important otters are to everyone across the world. We would ask you all to share this as widely as possible so that we can create even more awareness. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for giving up their time to tell us about the important otter work they're doing. And as you all have seen from the programme, it's pretty varied. I'd also like to thank our team at IOSF, Ben, Helen and Callum, as they've done so much to organise this webinar and World Otter Day as a whole. In November last year, we celebrated our 30th anniversary. We're not a huge organisation, but we are huge with the help of people like you, and we can achieve so much. That means there are thousands of people doing stuff worldwide. So let's enjoy this webinar and go forward in otter conservation together. And I'm going to hand you back to Ben, who's going to introduce our first speaker.
Thanks, Grace, and thanks for the introduction to the webinar today. I will be the person you'll see quite a lot of today. I will be the one introducing all the speakers and sort of chatting to them between the presentations. For any of you that have joined us in previous years, you'll kind of know the format, but I'll give a quick idea of how it's going to work with our 5 speakers this morning. So just to kind of reiterate what Grace says, IOSF launched World Otter Day to celebrate and most importantly raise awareness and support for otters and their conservation. Throughout the years, it has grown from strength to strength, thanks to people like yourselves, and for this, we can only thank you. This year, we actually have events in 48 countries. We got a last-minute event this morning of someone that was doing some work in Greece, which I failed to give to Grace, so although she said 47, it was actually 48. So that includes events in different countries such as Greece, Mongolia, Costa Rica, and Chile, and across every single continent apart from Antarctica. And it's brilliant to see so many events happening kind of across the world. So during the webinar, just a small piece of housekeeping, you may have questions for myself or any of the other panelists. So feel free to use the questions and answers and the chat box at the bottom. At the end of each presentation, we will ask the relevant speakers the questions that you have for them, and I'm sure they will answer as best they can. At the end as well, we'll have a little bit of time to kind of allow for final questions. So if these are to be directed at any certain panelists, then feel free to say. However, if not, then I'll guide them as best I feel. So for today, for the morning session of our World Otter Day webinar, we are delighted to be welcome 5 different speakers sharing their knowledge and experience and enthusiasm on a variety of different topics. So this morning's session will be offered the following presentations, and I'll introduce the speakers a little bit more prior to each of their presentations starting. So we have Lizzy Humphries of Battersea Park, who will be talking about social media and its role in the pet trade. We have Dr. Sarah du Plessis of Cardiff University Otter Project. who will be talking about what we can learn using conservation genomics. We have Tom Taylor of the Wildlife Friends Foundation Thailand on the illegal trade in Thailand and the rehab of rescued otters. We have Aurobindo Samal of Eco Earth Crusaders talking about otter conservation, a challenge in Odisha's landscape and Indian aspect. And last but certainly no means least, we have Aleksey Oleynikov, who will be talking about otters in Kazakhstan, the current status, challenges and conservation prospects. I'm sure you've all had enough of me talking for now, so without further ado, I think it will be best to pass over to our first speakers. So I will give a brief introduction to Lizzy and her work, and then I will pass over. So Lizzy is the senior keeper at Battersea Park Children's Zoo and has a particular interest in the effect of social media and the exotic wildlife trade. She is currently involved in writing a new set of guidelines which aim to prevent close contact imagery between humans and otters on social media, which is fueling the wildlife trade. Lizzy also launched Share Savvy campaign from Battersea Park Children's Zoo in 2024, which is a collaboration between zoos, sanctuaries, rescue centres, schools and colleges to educate the wider public on social media and the effect it can have on wild animals, creating tools to better identify images and videos online which harm wild populations. Lizzy, firstly for myself, thank you for joining us, and I will hand over to you. Thank you.
I shall just get my screen up. All right, can you see that okay?
Yeah, I can see that, Grant. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So, hello everyone. Thank you for having me. This is a topic I'm really keen on discussing, so I'm really grateful for having the platform in order to do so. So a little bit about myself. I'm currently the senior keeper at Battersea Park Children's Zoo. We're a small collection in South London. We might be small, but we always feel we try to punch above our weight in terms of conservational output. So we're involved in some fantastic projects at home and abroad. Now, being a smaller zoo, we do have the opportunity to highlight both unusual species and issues which may get overlooked in larger zoos. In particular, we hold species who are represented in the exotic wildlife trade, including some rescued from such environments. And we try to focus our daily keeper talks around this issue. Jason Palmer is our curator, as well as being the stud book holder for the Asian shortclaw. So this puts us in quite a good place to educate about the issues faced by Asian shortclaws with our own breeding pair, Tia and Mr. Darcy. We also recently launched our new campaign called Share Savvy, which I'll go into more detail about later on. But in a nutshell, its aim is to collaborate with as many organisations as possible to raise awareness of the problems caused by social media and the pet trade. As I'm sure many of you will know, pet otters have become a social media craze. I recently researched this for an article for the AWAC journal, and just by doing a simple search, I could see that #otter had been viewed 4.1 billion times on TikTok. Of course, wild otters are highly elusive, so therefore I did find it very difficult to find any video which featured a wild otter while scrolling through the most watched posts. Most of the otters represented are Asian shortclaws and smooth-coated, and they're being presented in a way which suggests that they're easy to handle pets. Many are dressed in clothes, they're put on leads, they may be swimming in baths or children's paddling pools, and they present an imagery that's far removed from their wild counterparts. On an aesthetic level, otters are easily perceived as being cute, which plays to a successful social media post. Now, by stripping otters of their wild context, it becomes really difficult for the average viewer to differentiate between an endangered wild animal and a domesticated pet. There's a really good study by Lauren Harrington about the popularity of pet otters on YouTube, which I'd highly recommend reading, which investigated the comment sections of a few popular pet otter videos. In this study, she demonstrated what many of us are already aware of, which is that the comment section of videos and social media posts often include sentiments suggesting a desire to obtain an otter, such as "I want one," comparisons to a puppy, or a wish to stroke or cuddle one. So regardless of whether these comments are actually realistically actionable, it demonstrates a popular view that touching or keeping otters as pets is the norm. And this undermines their inherent danger, biodiversity value, and threatened status. This idea is perpetuated by the increase of otter cafes and other captive settings, such as zoos and sanctuaries, who might offer the opportunity for close contact experience with wild animals. Furthermore, those who work at zoos or sanctuary or out in the field with wild otters will be considered to be animal experts. So therefore, we have the ability to both contradict or validate the public's preconception of otters. Now, this, of course, is a relatively new and very fluid topic. The speed of growth in social media massively outweighs the ability to research its impact. And therefore, it's really difficult to truly quantify the impact that social media has on the wildlife trade. This means that we do have to join the dots from the research that does exist and try and get ahead of any potential conservational impact. So what we do know is that 66.2% of the global population has access to the internet. We know that social media directly influences human behaviour, attitudes, and lifestyle choices. There is more research available around the impact that social media has on pet primates, which does suggest that when a video of a pet primate goes viral, the poaching rates increase. The diagram you can see on the screen is from Lauren Harrington's study about otters on YouTube, which I mentioned before. The larger the word, the more frequently it appeared in all languages in the comments of viral otter videos, demonstrating a link at least between viral videos and a desire to obtain otters as pets. Studies have also shown that the film Finding Nemo increased the sales of clownfish, Zootopia increased the sales of fennec foxes, and Harry Potter brought snowy owls to the exotic pet trade too. So while there may not be any concrete evidence that social media is directly causing the decline of wild otters, it isn't too far of a link to infer that there is a potential link between social media and the decline of an endangered species. The 2018 traffic report found that one of the most pressing threats to Asian short-clawed otters was the illegal wildlife trade, where they recorded over 900 individuals being advertised for the pet trade within 4 months. In a worst-case scenario, the Asian shortclaw may be extinct in the wild within the next 100 years. The increase of otter cafes and other captive experiences bring the possibility of close contact into the public spectrum, and their advertisement on social media spreads the idea that close contact with an otter is a tangible opportunity. Decontextualized images of otters in domestic settings promote the idea of an otter being an affectionate pet, rather than revealing the truth of the wildlife trade, of the killing of the parents for the pups, of the removal of the teeth and scent glands, and of the studies which show that the inappropriate diet, space, and lighting cause stress, illness, and inability to express natural behaviours. Now, we know that viral trends can increase demand for the exotic wildlife trade. We know the otter population is in decline due to the trade, and we know of the barbaric animal welfare issues within the trade too. So with all of these factors in mind, we've got to get ahead of the trend to try and ensure that we break the link between social media and the pet trade. As by the time the research proving that direct link has been done, how many otters will we have directly lost from the wild population caused by social media? So how does this link back to us working with otters? Well, as we know, otters in particular, Asian short-clawed otters, are heavily featured in zoos and other captive settings globally. Thanks to the work of Jason Palmer, the stud book improvements mean that there is much more care being taken over breeding, and the genetics of the zoological population are much better known. This means that in a conservational sense, we are pushing forward. We're trying to ensure that we are building a captive population with strong genetic purpose, should we lose the wild one. However, we do need to match these excellent improvements with questioning whether our behaviour around these animals may be affecting their portrayal, and therefore the potential of future conservational success. Many collections offer otter experiences where the public get the opportunity to enter an otter enclosure and be in close contact with that animal. Even if they don't, despite in the UK otters being category 1 animals, which means that they're deemed to be at greater risk of injury to humans, it's really unusual for otters to be treated within a protected contact environment like we do at Battersea Park Children's Zoo. Many keepers will go into enclosures with otters, as historically, protected contact with otters would have been bizarre, as enclosures haven't been designed to allow the separated space for humans and otters. The problem with this is that it perpetuates the image that otters are safe to be around. Regardless of whether that individual animal is known to be safe, the general public just sees a human close to a safe, cute animal. It's very difficult to see an otter in close contact with a human and immediately understand from that image that it's A, dangerous, B, a biosecurity risk, C, endangered, and D, in our case, part of an important breeding program due to the loss of the species because of the illegal wildlife trade. Therefore, even if it's deemed that the physical risk of the animal is low, shouldn't we be trying to avoid perpetuating the preconception that many social media users have, that otters are safe, easy to handle, and potentially good pets? Furthermore, the member of the public may take a photo of a keeper in close contact with an otter, which could later be decontextualized, particularly if that keeper is not wearing appropriate PPE or have a uniform or logo showing. I'm sure many of you have heard the terrible stories of animal carers who have perfectly good intentions, working to prevent the illegal wildlife trade in some cases, having imagery of them in close contact with their animal decontextualized, and then used to advertise the sale of said species. We can control the output of our own organisation's social media account, but what we can't control is the images of people who just walk past, taken by people who just walk past. The link between animal carers and social media has already been explored following the release of the Responsible Imagery Guidelines by the IUCN Primate Specialist Group. These guidelines have changed many zoo social media policies, as it becomes generally accepted within the industry that photos of humans, maybe with primates off shoulders, for example, are just not appropriate and undermine the conservational efforts around them. It's easy for those of us who have the privilege of working closely with our wild animals to somehow feel like we have the right to touch or photograph them. However, it's rapidly being understood that the risk of decontextualization is too great, thanks to these research and guidelines laid out by the primate group. In fact, a follow-up study of the guidelines showed that even using a caption to contextualize images does not minimize the harmful impact of that human-primate interaction. While there is success and change with regards to primates, I feel it's yet to extend into other species affected by the pet trade. I'm currently involved in writing a similar set of guidelines for otters. However, we ultimately need a cultural change in the way that we view wild animals on social media. So how can we as individuals and organisations push for change? Well, for me, there are two approaches. There's the grassroots and there's the higher institutional change, which challenges the source. So Facebook, Instagram and TikTok, as well as the conservational work going on in the field to track down and stop poaching. From a grassroots perspective, as a zoo, we can tailor our daily behaviours as well as our educational output, raising awareness around the issues of social media and the exotic pet trade. Zoos need to make choices about what image they wish to portray of their animals. Is it time to adapt husbandry for animals whose conservational issues include the exotic pet trade by changing enclosures to apply protected contact rules? Should photos from the zoo account show staff physically interacting with animals identified as being at high risk of misinterpretation without clear and essential cause? Should zoos have animal experiences which allow members of the public to get close to dangerous animals? Staff have to be educated about their role in preventing an improper perspective of high-risk animals, as well as the responsibility they have to be careful on their own social media. We must all make sure that we're not liking, commenting, or sharing photos or videos of pet otters, even if all we want to do is say that they're wrong, because the algorithms can't differentiate between a comment condemning a post from a comment supporting it. It will still share it to a wider audience. Signage and educational talks must become more prevalent across facilities, such as this one I've got on the left here. This is our sign at Battersea Park. And this means that the public can understand directly that liking and sharing videos of pet otters on the internet spreads them to a wider audience and must be prevented. And this is why we've started our new campaign, Share Savvy. We want to get as many organisations together as possible to educate the general public about how to navigate social media to stop the trend of viral exotic pet videos. We are creating resources to be used by anyone, such as this flowchart, which creates an easy checklist to assess whether a video of an animal on the internet is something which should be shared with a wider audience or not. We've also developed a workshop to educate an important target audience, the younger generation, about how to navigate social media, which is transferable to other collections, and a video series which encourages everyone to share a video about an animal within their establishment who might be affected by the pet trade. On the 3rd of August, we are carrying out an event both at Battersea and other willing organisations called Share Savvy Saturday, which will educate whatever audience our organisations share, and also fundraising for charities who work to protect these species in the wild. So where do we go from here? Well, we do need more research about the true impact of social media on the international pet otter trade. However, as I discussed, this is a fast-moving and complex topic, so we're going to have to try and solve it maybe before we have the necessary proof of it. We must challenge the source, which could be the greatest challenge this issue has. When the wonderful campaign Tickle is Torture was launched to protect the slow loris, it successfully got Instagram to put warning messages on #slowloris, #tiger selfie, elephant selfie, etc. But unfortunately, a recent study has shown that these warnings are not having the intended impact. Those who wish to share and access these posts just click past the warning. I would also say there's not a warning for anything to do with otters. It is also currently not possible to report posts showing animals in what we consider to be inappropriate environments, such as cafes and homes. So this is something that in time does need to be challenged. So for now, education might be the only solution. We somehow need to make these videos uncool, and something that in particular the younger generation is not keen on sharing. But for now, those of us who work with otters must ensure we're not being hypocritical in our portrayal of them. We need to actively separate the expert and essential care that we give our captive otters from those who wish to exploit them for the exotic pet trade. So that's a short introduction to social media and the role that we all play in protecting otters online. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions now, but if you would like to be in contact with me, then do feel free to drop me an email. And if you know anyone, or you as individuals and organisation would like to join the Share Savvy campaign, you'd also be very welcome, so I can give you some more information on that too. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lizzy, and thanks for your really informative and actually quite powerful presentation on a pretty sad topic, to be honest with you. It's interesting that you mentioned at the start about, before I start talking, if anyone has any questions, feel free to just throw them in the chat or questions and answer box, and I'm sure Lizzy will be happy to answer them. But yeah, I did a study. It was a very brief study. I wouldn't even call it a study, but I was on Instagram and I just searched otter and took a kind of percentage of how many were pets and how many were wild, and actually 88% of that base study were pets.
Absolutely,
which is crazy. And the other thing I found really interesting was you mentioned quite near the end of your presentation about how sharing by condemning the videos is also potentially a negative thing. So although I'm sure everybody here is totally on the side of pet otters are bad and we need to preserve wild, and I'm sure I have done it also, and I'm sure others have done it, have shared, they'll be like, this is bad, it's actually possibly not a good thing.
No, it's a really tricky one, because what we need is as you know, as people who care about animals, we want to do something for animals, to care about animals. But actually, in this instance, inaction is what you need to do. So when you see those posts, unfortunately at the moment, because there's no function in which to report these videos, the strongest thing that you can do is scroll past it. By the second that you've watched it, you've given that video a view. The second you liked it, commenting it, sharing it, you've told the algorithms that it's popular. That's the way that social media works. And you know, there's no one really understands the algorithms, but you know, sharing increases that audience massively, because not only do you share it to your audience, but the video then appears to other people as well. So in action, you know, what we're telling people is if you, the second you notice it's a pet otter, just scroll past it. Like, just don't come back to it, don't look at it. That's the best you can do.
What about, sorry, I was just going to say, what about like reporting? You know, you can click like, I can't remember what it's called.
You can, however, the reporting function is not great.
No, it's not. I've tried it.
Yeah, I mean, you can get the sales of pet animals, but again, for my research, I disappeared into a Facebook group where in the UK, where people are selling pet exotics, so squirrel monkeys, marmosets, meerkats. I mean, pretty much anything was being sold on that Facebook page. And I reported the whole group. I mean, it was absolutely concrete that was selling, and it came back 3 times saying, no, it's not, and it's not a problem. So at the moment, I think because it's effectively automated, it's not assessed properly. It can't be assessed properly. It's not an issue that's understood well enough. And that's why that's the part of the source that needs to be tackled, which is going to be the most difficult bit. But I think that the source will only be tackled once we've got the grassroots, the larger audience as possible, saying, actually, I don't want this stuff. I hate this stuff is really bad. Maybe it was cool once, it's not cool now.
Yeah.
You know, and that creates an audience that the big minds at TikTok.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that they didn't ban it, because I basically something similar with other people, specifically for otters, like reported these groups saying they were otters. But actually in Facebook law or rules, it actually says that any animal being sold, so cats, any domestic animals are legally, they're not allowed to be sold on Facebook. So theoretically, if you're reporting any animal, should be taken down, but it's not.
My post said, this is not a sales post, but comment on what animals you're breeding. And then underneath, everyone comments on what animals they're breeding, PM for details, they're selling. But because it doesn't say the word sale, it can't pick up on it.
That's crazy, isn't it?
It's really easy to bypass.
Yeah, and I've tried a couple of times to contact Facebook, or Meta as it's known now, both sides of when it changed, and I've never had any luck. Or I've never.
And, you know, there was what looked like a really good improvement with the warning message for hashtag slow loris, hashtag elephant selfie, and it, you know, it's still there. It works. I've tried it, but number one, it doesn't apply for otters, and number two, actually, this latest study suggests it's not having the desired impact anyway. So it needs to be a rethink. And I think ultimately the only way we'll get through to it is if it becomes content that people just don't want to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
And which through education will ensure that.
Yeah. I have a question for you. So somebody, just as anonymous, excuse me, how can the public ensure they're engaging in a responsible otter experience when visiting a zoo, as some still allow direct contact?
So, how do the public ensure that?
Yeah, how do they ensure that they're engaging in a responsible experience?
Well, it's a really good question. I think the first thing that we always say, so we have keeper experiences at Battersea. Feeding the otters is part of that, but you're doing it from outside the enclosure. You can tell that from the website because you see photos. It's very quickly to take a look at an organisation's social media to see whether they're advertising their encounters as being close contact with otters. I won't name and shame, but if they're advertising it as a close contact experience, you're going to see it because it's something that people want to see. If you're unsure, it's always worth emailing the zoo and just ask, how does this encounter take place? Is there direct contact with the otters? And go from there, really.
Yeah. I guess also you might confirm this, but I guess if you're unsure, then don't do it. I guess it's the easiest way.
Absolutely, yeah. I had a really interesting email from someone who works for the Civic Project yesterday, who is really put a completely new perspective on it for me yesterday, which is that when we go abroad, if we're going on a holiday and there was experience to walk with lions or something like that, if you were informed about the topic, you'd say, no, I don't want to do that because it's not normal to walk with a lion. It's the dangerous animals, you know, and you wouldn't do that, and you'd base that on wildlife tourism. Same with elephant riding, that sort of thing. You'd know that that's elephant tourism, but people from outside of our home countries come to our countries and come to an experience where they are potentially stroking an otter. Still a dangerous animal, but because it's effectively, we think that because we're a conservation zoo, we're doing good things for conservation for these animals from a different country. We kind of think that that's okay, but it's actually the exact same thing. I was ashamed to say I'd not thought of it that way around before, but it's really, really the exact same thing. And so if you're ever going anywhere with somewhere where there might be a direct contact with an animal, it is so important to double check. And yeah, if you're not sure, just don't do it. It's not the end of the world. It's better not to perpetuate that image than to be involved in that image.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. I'll give the attendees 30 more seconds or so to if they got any more questions for you. But in the meantime, I will say thank you so much for taking
Thank you for having me.
And just for the attendees, Lizzy can't stay with us for the whole time. So if you do have any questions there or any follow-up questions that might come from it, feel free to send me an email and I can ask Lizzy, or I can forward it to Lizzy, I'm sure, if you're happy with that.
Absolutely.
But
Fantastic.
yeah, so thank you so much for your time and your talk.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I will now look to pass over to our next presenter. Thanks, Lizzy.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Okay, so our next presenter is Dr. Sarah du Plessis of Cardiff University Otter Project, who will be presenting on what we can learn using conservation genomics. Just a wee introduction into Cardiff University, the Otter Project itself, and to Sarah, Dr. Sarah. So the Cardiff University Otter Project has been collecting otters found dead from across Britain since 1994 to conduct a huge range of research on the species, including chemical contamination and conservation genetics, among many other topics. Sarah has been a member of the Cardiff University Otter Project since 2019, recently completing her PhD applying conservation genomics to study the Eurasian otter in Britain and across the species range. Sarah, I'll pass over to you.
Great. So thank you very much for asking us to talk today. We have a short video from Liz Chadwick, who couldn't be here today. But before we play that, I just wanted to give a warning that there are some photos of otter post-mortem in there. So if that's something you'd rather not see, I'd suggest tuning out for the next 5 minutes.
Perfect. And I will share that. And if Sarah, if you can just confirm that you can hear it when I start it, that would be great. I don't see it.
Thank you for inviting us. It's lovely to be here for IOSF World Otter Day. And we're also celebrating 30 years of the Otter Project. We collect otters found dead from across the UK. We do a post-mortem examination to collect samples and data. And we use those in a very broad range of research. And I'm going to give you an overview of that research now. I just also wanted to highlight that we now have an Otter Project data sharing portal, which you can use to access some of our data. Post-mortem analysis is not so much about why the animal died in this case, but actually provides us with an incredible resource, helps us to understand how those otters have lived and the environment that they live in. So I'm just going to go through some of the papers that we've published over the last couple of years to show you the diversity of that work. This is a paper by Nia Thomas. The figure here shows an excerpt which shows the change in genetic diversity and structuring over time from 1999 up to 2014. Nia used muscle tissue and extracted DNA from that from 419 otters. And the results show that despite the recovery that we've seen in both numbers and range of the otter population, genetic structuring persists and diversity remains quite low. And that really highlights the importance in conservation of monitoring genetic diversity, as well as looking at overall range and spread of populations. In this study, Lorna Drake was looking at diet of otters, and she used DNA again, but this time from fecal samples, so that she could look at the diversity of prey species that the otters were eating. And this figure shows some of that overall diversity and also illustrates the difference in results between those obtained using DNA versus results obtained from hard part analysis. And we found that DNA allowed a much greater resolution of dietary analysis than hard parts, and some species were quite underrepresented by hard part analysis. Moving to chemical analysis, in this study we used liver samples, and this contributed to a very big project, the Life Apex project, which screened samples from across Europe and across multiple species, applying chemical analysis methods to look at the diverse range of chemicals that are found in wildlife from terrestrial, freshwater and marine systems, and showed a really diverse cocktail of chemicals, metabolites and transformation products. So we can see there that turning up in those systems, we can see pharmaceuticals, pesticides, perfluorinated substances, and things like artificial sweeteners and coffee, which are also turning up in our waterways. This one representing a paper just out from Emily O'Rourke, a current PhD student. Again, she used liver samples here and was able to demonstrate a really clear decline in concentration of PFOA, which is one of the perfluorinated substances, with distance from a factory source which was known to use this chemical in the past. It's a very persistent chemical, and this spatial gradient away from the factory still persists. The analysis at the same time shows a wide range of new emerging perfluorinated substances in otter liver. So these are substances which have been brought in to replace some of those which have been banned because of their known toxic effects. Again, focusing on liver samples here, we're really pleased now that we're able to supply 30 liver samples per year as part of the H4 indicator project. So this is part of the 25-year environment programme in the UK, screening for chemicals including PCBs, PVDs, PFASs, metals and rodenticides. Chemicals are much more detectable in otters than in lower trophic levels, so they're a really valuable indicator, and this report just came out a couple of weeks ago, and we'll be continuing to provide samples and to do the data analysis for this, we hope, for many years to come. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through some of the recent research. I also wanted to flag it's not just about the research. We also really enjoy working with others for engagement. Otters are a fantastic, charismatic species that enables us to do a lot of engagement, and it provides a really fantastic opportunity for training for undergraduate and postgraduate students, and for engagement with school children and members of the public. And the image shown here is some of our current placement students, undergraduate students who come and work with us for a year, and they're doing an engagement event at Cardiff Science Festival. That's enough from me. I'm going to pass over to Sarah, who's going to talk about her own brilliant work using genetic and genomic tools to understand more about otter population history and phylogenetics. Thank you.
Perfect. Over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Cool. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, I can see that.
Brilliant. So I'm now going to talk, as Liz mentioned, a bit about how we can use genetics and genomics in conservation, and specifically, obviously, in otters. But before I go too much further, I just want to acknowledge the support of the Wellcome Sanger Institute and the Darwin Tree of Life project, and also my current affiliation to the University of Copenhagen. So what is genetics and genomics, and why does it matter? Well, genetics is the study of the DNA sequence in all of our cells, and these can be either A, T, C, or G bases, and the sequence of these codes for all the proteins that make up all our biology. In the Eurasian otter, the sequence is about 2.44 billion bases long. And the study of genetics is when you look at just a few regions in this genome, perhaps 10 to 15. And when we are starting to talk about genomics, it's a sort of tool that's been used much more recently. We're talking about looking at the whole 2.4 billion bases of the genome. Genetics has been used in conservation for the last sort of 30 years, but genomics, as I said, is only starting to be applied to these sorts of questions now. So you may be thinking, maybe you've heard of genetics in a sort of more medical context, but how can it be used in conservation? Well, it can tell us a lot about the evolution of species and populations. And I've put a little diagram down here to show how, when you're looking at the sequence of DNA, you have mutations or substitutions that occur between generations. And in the vast majority of these cases, these have absolutely no effect on the fitness of the individual. And so they stay in the population. And when we look at how these differences move around, we can understand, looking back in time, when populations split off from one another, and lots of other things to do with their evolution over the past tens, hundreds, thousands, even millions of years. So how do we use this in the context of conservation? Well, some of the main questions that genetics and genomics are used to answer is understanding population structuring and gene flow. So does a barrier like a mountain range stop migration of otters? Also things like genetic diversity and inbreeding, and this can tell us a lot about the extinction risk of small and isolated populations. And also in surveying like eDNA and non-invasive methods. For example, looking at can we use sprain samples to understand how many individuals there are in a region, and these tools are becoming more and more important in regions where otters are especially rare. So that's enough of the background. Time to talk about the otters. So it probably will not come as a huge surprise to most of you that Eurasian otters in Britain have been through a huge population bottleneck. It's thought that this started around 1950 and was caused by the accumulation of chemical contaminants like pesticides, as otters are the apex predator in most of these systems, in the UK at least. Although the details of the timing, the extent of the bottleneck isn't very well known, the recovery has been really, really well monitored in national otter surveys that started in 1977. And these have been carried out in England, Wales, and Scotland right through to the present day, although only some of these surveys are shown in this figure here. But I've included this to show where the populations were through the bottleneck and where they recovered from. For example, you can see in Wales, there was a very high proportion of otters that seemed to survive through the bottleneck better than some other areas. And this reflects what Liz mentioned a minute ago in terms of the genetic population. So we think that otters were pushed back into 4 regions when through this population bottleneck, and that led to them becoming genetically different from one another and forming these 4 stronghold populations. So you might think, okay, well, we've used genetics, we now know what's going on. What's the point in using genomics? And that was one of the questions that I asked in some work that I'm going to talk about now. So we had 45 samples from across the UK, and these were all from otters that were collected as a part of the Otter Project work. And for the same samples, we used the same genetic methods that are really well established and have been used lots, and also these more advanced genomic tools to try and understand if there was a difference. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of depth in these results, but I'm always happy to talk about it more if anyone is interested. But instead, I'm just going to pull out 2 of our sort of main findings, which I think summarize this work. And the first one is if we look at the mitochondrial genome. Now, this is a small circle of DNA, which is maternally inherited. So every individual only inherits 1 copy from their mother. And this is found, so it's about 16,000 bases. And we have a figure of all the results that we had from the UK on the left. So each coloured circle is a unique sequence, and the size of the circle tells us how many individuals that sequence was found in. So you can see this one here was found in multiple individuals. We have the line connecting these 2, and the number of dashes on it indicate how many differences there are in the DNA sequence here and here. So most of these samples are outlined in blue, and we've called them lineage 1. And these are the majority of the samples that we found in the UK. And you can see that most of these sequences are separated by a few mutations. So there are only a few bases different between a lot of the, maybe 5 at max, between the sequences that we found in the UK. And then we have this branch over here leading to some of these samples. And all of these samples are coloured red because they were found in the east of England. And we've called this lineage 1. And you can see here that the difference between lineage 1 and lineage 2 is separated by this long branch. And using some of the methods I mentioned earlier, we dated the point at which these two lineages split off from one another, and this was at least 80,000 years ago. So these are two really, really distinct mitochondrial lineages, and it's very, very unexpected that we see this diversity in a small island population such as Britain. Yeah, so this was very unexpected. Oh, importantly, this wasn't found using genetic tools to study the same mitochondria. So already we're starting to see the differences when you start applying genomic tools, and some of these are really, really big differences. The second result I wanted to share was looking at the population size over time, and we do this again using the genomic tools. So along this axis here, we have time starting with modern day on the left and going back 800 years. And you can see in red is highlighted the period from 1950s to the 1970s when we think that the bottleneck occurred. And on this axis here, we have what's called effective population size, but you can think of this as a proxy for the actual population size at the time. And so the first result I want to show is coloured in green here, and this is the population in the north of England and in Scotland. And you can see that over the last 800 years, it's gradually declined, but not by a huge amount. We then have these two populations here that went through very sharp bottlenecks. And this is the population in blue from the southwest of England. And the bottleneck almost perfectly aligns with 1950s and the 1970s, as we thought was the case. And also this population here coloured red in the east, and it's a similar timing. But the biggest difference between these two is that in the east, we have a very, very severe bottleneck. And this is shown by such a small effective population size at the trough. And we would expect, if a population is to survive this, that you'd see extremely low diversity. And as I say, it's very impressive that the population survived this. Last population here is shown in Wales, which is in purple, sorry, which is Wales. And you can see that there is a slight bottleneck that happens around the 1800s and potentially even an increase through the recent time of the contaminant bottleneck. Although we'll probably never know what's caused this, it's possible that it's associated with otter hunting, which was reasonably prevalent at the time. There's a lot more results and understanding around this work, and if you're interested, I'd be happy to talk more about this, but this is sort of an overview in terms of the power of genomics and what we can learn about otter populations. Lastly, I just want to say that all the work that the Otter Project does is a team effort, and there's a huge number of people who help out in supporting the project outside of Cardiff also, and so a huge thanks goes to everyone there. And lastly, if you're ever in the UK and you find a dead otter, it's really important that you report it and call it in, because that is entirely how the Otter Project functions. And if you are interested in finding out more or following what we do, there's some links below to follow us on social media or get in contact with us over email. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Sarah. That was really interesting. It's always amazing to see the different sort of diverse things you can do to contribute to conservation. And although genetics and genomics are certainly not something I know a lot about, it was interesting to hear exactly how it works and how you can gauge the history. The question I have, and it's maybe a kind of silly one, is like you mentioned that lineage 1 to lineage 2/3 was about 80,000 years ago. That I think that number is correct. How do you determine that? How do you know that, basically?
So we have estimates of so the closest related species to the otters split off using these same mitochondrial sequences, and also using fossil records. And then you use those sort of tools, I guess it's to like anchor certain periods in time when you know different lineages have split off from one another. And then from that, you can estimate more recent changes. If that makes sense.
And you kind of mentioned that there's almost like 4 genetically semi-fragmented populations in the UK in terms of these, I think south, yeah, there was 4 anyway, four areas. Do you envisage that possibly being an issue in terms of genetic diversity in the future or even currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the populations in the UK do have really low diversity because they've been through this bottleneck, and that is a conservation concern. they are starting to, so demographically, they have joined up. So we see otters in these regions between them now, but we don't see gene flow between these two sort of areas, or between these 4 areas really, which is a bit of a concern because we would have expected them to start breeding, and that would have boosted diversity in these sorts of regions. But we don't see that. So that is a bit of a concern. And at the moment, we don't really know why that is. But one of the issues with having a small population like in Britain, when diversity is lost, it's other than slowly over time, it's really hard to boost that sort of diversity again.
Yeah, and what would be the reason that kind of the North England / Scotland populations never bottlenecked?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. I think if we assume that all of these bottlenecks were driven by chemical contaminants, we would have to assume that it would be something to do with the difference of how those were used in Scotland, perhaps. It could also be
human populations a lot less, maybe.
Exactly, that there were more sort of rural areas where otters could go to avoid the sort of agricultural pesticides and things. But yeah, there's a lot of questions here that we might never know.
That's fair. We do have a few questions. Kevin Murphy. Kevin, for your first question about require more assistance in terms of otter rescue, just give me an email and we can discuss that at a later date. But in regards to questions to yourself, Sarah, Kevin's again asked, I was made aware of a badly mangled adult otter as I rescued the cub. Would this be viable to send to the Otter Project? Basically, it is bones and some skin left.
Absolutely, it's worth sending an email to check. I'm not sure if you still have the otter or not. In most cases, even if we can't do anything with whatever's left, we can still take a recording of where, especially if it was a road traffic accident, we can still take a recording of where this happened, and this can feed into some of the work that Liz didn't mention, but we obviously do work with trying to mitigate road traffic accidents and areas that are hotspots where these sorts of things are happening a lot. So if you're not sure, it's always worth just getting in contact with us, and then someone in the team will be able to give you a bit more specific guidance for your case.
Perfect, thanks. Kevin, again, if you missed Sarah putting up the email address, just ask me in the email you send in regards to your first question. I'll pass on. Dennis has asked, have you identified any influence from the reintroduction program in the 80s and 90s, and could this explain the difference between Series 1 and Series 3?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's another really good question. It's something we're trying to dig into in a bit more depth at the moment, and it's proving to be quite a difficult sort of question to answer. But the reintroduction efforts were focused in the east of England, which is where we see this lineage. And what I didn't share as well is we see some really strange signals in diversity in that area as well. We do think the only thing that can explain all of the different strange results that we see there is probably some incoming otter from somewhere outside of the UK. And we've done a lot of work looking across Western Europe, and we don't think that that's the source. So we think potentially that there might have been otters to come outside of Europe into the UK around that time. But this is all entirely hypothetical, and there's a lot more genetic work that needs to be done before we really can dig into that and understand exactly what happened.
Yeah, perfect, thanks. It doesn't look like you have any further questions. So I will take this time to thank you again. Like with Lizzy, if anyone has any questions, then feel free to send them through to me or anything, because Sarah also has to leave a little bit early. But if you hang around for 5 minutes or so, and if anyone does put any questions in, you can just answer them in the chat. That'd be very useful. But in the meantime, I will say thank you so much for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great, thanks very much.
Okay. I will now pass over to our third presenter, who is Tom Taylor of the Wildlife Friends Foundation. So we had a little introduction from Lizzy in terms of social media and the impacts on the pet trade. But Tom's going to talk a little bit more about kind of rescuing otters from the pet trade and the illegal trade in Thailand. So he's going to present on the illegal trade in Thailand and the rehab of rescued otters. So just a little introduction to Tom. So Tom is the WFFT, which is Wildlife Friends Foundation Thailand Operations Manager. His role is rather diverse, managing the Wildlife Rescue Centre, including staff and animal management, coordinating rescue missions, and working on illegal wildlife trade investigations, among a million other things. Working for WFFT for around 12 years, Tom has been able to help countless animals return to the wild and provide them with a new, far better life than what they had previously. All the animals WFFT rescue come from terrible situations, so being able to help them is what keeps his passion alive. Tom, I'll pass over to you and thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ben, for the great introduction. Let's get the presentation up. There we go. Are we functioning?
Yeah, I can see your presentation there.
Wonderful. Right, we're up. Okay. Yeah. So again, thank you, Ben, for the great introduction there. I'm going to talk a little bit about the illegal trade here in Thailand, and then a little bit about our work with rescued otters. Firstly, I'll start by giving you a bit of introduction of WFFT. We were founded in 2001 with the main aims of rescuing, rehabilitating, and releasing wild animals back to where they came from, basically. It turned out it wasn't so simple, and we ended up providing permanent refuge for so many animals. Most of the animals we get are unwanted pets. They come from the illegal wildlife trade, directly from the illegal wildlife trade. The government often asks us to house confiscated animals, or from closing down zoos or tourist attractions, which we see many of here in Thailand. We're the largest NGO rescue centre in Thailand. We give refuge to around 800 animals of about 60 species at the moment, which is crazy. I've been involved with WFFT for about 16 years, and the growth I've seen myself here has been exponential. It's been a little bit crazy, really. So we've provided refuge or shelter to thousands of wild animals over the years. Many of them have been rehabilitated and released back to the wild. And again, those that can't be released back to the wild are given the best possible captive environment we can provide them with here. We operate the first NGO wildlife rescue hospital here in Thailand, and every year we treat hundreds of wild animals that come into conflict with humans, and we also have a clinic that opens every day for the domestic animals of the local community. And our illegal wildlife trade stuff. So we have a very small team, which is made up of one Thai operative and myself, who assists him a little bit on doing mostly online trade. If we're talking specifically about otters, we do a lot of stuff with big cats, or have been doing for the past 6 years, but the project is finished. So we're actually broadening our illegal wildlife trade investigation output, and hopefully doing a little bit more on otters. And any of the evidence or intel that we gather is shared with authorities or other organizations, law enforcement organizations such as US Fish and Wildlife, working in Thailand quite actively on the illegal wildlife trade. So Thailand is home to 4 different otter species. We have the hairy-nosed otter, the Asian small-clawed otter, the Eurasian otter, and the smooth-coated otter, 3 of which are listed by CITES in Appendix 1, giving them a higher level of protection. But the hairy-nosed otter is still in Appendix 2, unfortunately. And all of the 4 species are threatened with extinction here in Thailand. Threats. So threatened by habitat loss, pollution, conflicts with humans, illegal wildlife trade, and the demand for pets, petting cafes, and parts used for traditional medicine. Just to point out the larger photo on there, we have a huge, massive habitat loss and conflict with humans in fish farms and shrimp farms here in Thailand. We're I think, the 3rd largest shrimp exporter in the world, and so much of our mangrove forests have been ripped down and turned into farms. And obviously this used to be prime otter habitat. Sadly, no longer. A little bit about the illegal wildlife trade and our monitoring. So our scope, or our current capabilities, are basically picking up otters that are being sold in groups that we monitor an array of species. So it's not just otters we focus on. We have seen an increase over the past 6-7 years of otters being illegally sold online. We've seen an increase in seizures, and we've seen an increase in unwanted pets being dumped on government rescue centres or NGO rescue centres like ourselves. And as the first speaker noted, the online trade has been well documented over the years. And in 2019, the smooth coated and the small clawed were both upgraded to CITES Appendix 1, offering a little bit more protection or a little bit more regulation, should we say. But we are still seeing so many for sale right now. And I myself, or my avatar, are members of quite a few groups which are dedicated to selling pet otters online. And just recently, after being closed for a few years, some of these groups are now opening again. They actually shut down after quite a lot of intense investigations by the authorities, but it seems we're seeing an increase yet again, which is very sad. So anyway, so here's a bit of a selection of what we see online every day. Mostly Asian small-clawed, but we also see smooth-coated otters within the trade, a small amount. And then we can also see a hairy-nosed otter that we saw for sale in Myanmar late last year, which was a weird one. It's a very, very rare species that we don't often see in the trade, but he was being sold in northern Myanmar. And then the image at the bottom of the screen is evidence that not all the otters that we're seeing in the trade are actually caught from the wild. We do see a small level of otters being bred for the pet trade here, which is pretty crazy. So the trade and private ownership of all 4 species of otter is illegal here in Thailand. A little bit about the price. It's next to nothing. So we're looking at about 2,000 Thai baht, which is $55 US, or to anywhere up to 4,000 baht, which is $110 US. So the price for me is ridiculously cheap for such an endangered species. They're yeah, very, very cheap on the markets. So the recent intel is saying, so we do a lot of interviews with illegal wildlife traders. A lot of these big players actually sell a lot of different species, and we are hearing that they're still being smuggled into Japan to the petting cafes. But interestingly, we're seeing an increase in them also being smuggled into Taiwan as well over the past year. And here's a few examples of these. So just some press releases here. So we've got a Taiwanese man that was arrested smuggling otters in his underwear out of the airport late last year here in Bangkok. And then an otter that was named a rat in some of the media outlets that it was being publicized at. It escaped out of the box mid-flight and was crawling through the plane. Horrendous. And then at the bottom of the screen, we can see a man was arrested for otter training in Chacheng Sao in northeast Thailand. That one's an interesting one because he was actually found selling the otter online. And we find it quite difficult to actually share intel if we've only got 1 or 2 posts from a person, even if sometimes we have a little bit more details. It's sometimes quite difficult to share the intel with authorities and actually get something happen. So it's quite positive to see that this man was arrested for selling an otter online. A little bit about the law here in Thailand. So we do have strong wildlife laws. It was updated, the Wildlife Conservation and Protection Act was updated in 2019, so 5 years ago, and it does offer wildlife authorities or provide wildlife authorities with far higher penalties for those who break the law, for those who are trading otters. So the illegal trade, export and import of any wild animals that are protected, including the 4 otter species, maximum 10-year imprisonment and 1 million baht, which is $27,000 US, which is a lot of money to a person who earns about £7 a day. And then the possession itself, so the illegal possession of wild animals, maximum 5-year imprisonment or 500,000 baht, which is $13,500 US. Another positive sign here in Thailand, the Department of National Parks, who's in charge of the wildlife, has recently established a wildlife crime intelligence unit, investigation unit, just late last year or early this year, to analyse information and support police in locating and arresting illegal traders of endangered species and other wildlife. So we are seeing positive things, hopefully sooner rather than later, in arresting the culprits who are selling these otters online. Okay, so a little bit about our work as WFFT. We have rescued around 40 otters in our history. I can't give you the exact number because our veterinary records from the early years are a little bit outdated. So we're about 40 otters, and we currently have 22 here on site. 21 of them are small-clawed, and then 1 hairy-nosed otter. And you can see just some of the images of where our animals come from. People keep them in concrete pits. Bad skin conditions of the one there on the table, and then somebody kept in a very, very small, dirty, hideous cage, and an infant otter there being fed by one of our veterinary team. We get a few infants coming in, but they're usually around a year old when they become very noisy or bitey, and people don't realize that they smell so bad, etc., etc. And then one of the most harrowing cases, you can see the otter with the neck injury there. She was tied to a post with a chain around her neck for the first few years of her life, and the chain literally grew inside her neck and caused a huge, huge wound there, which was grim. But she's now happy and lives in a group of 5 other otters, all females, which is nice to see. I've made a little bit of a chart here for you, so you can actually see from 2001 our founding, and then the increase in unwanted pets being handed over to WFFT. So from, say, 2014, 2015, we saw a huge spike in 2017. And then 2022, we didn't receive any. And then back now, 2023, we received 5 and 0 this year so far. December was our last one to learn, but we are still receiving a large amount of otters. And from personal experience visiting government rescue centres or breeding centres, of which we have 22 here in Thailand, they are overcrowded, and there are so many otters in pretty poor conditions, unwanted pet otters that are being surrendered by owners. So a little bit about our habitats here, and back on to always being at full capacity, or generally being at full capacity. We back in 2018, 2019, I had a waiting list of otters that we actually couldn't take in because we didn't have any space for them. And luckily we were able to receive some grants and some helps, even from you guys at IOSF, to help us build some wonderful habitats for our otters. We try to house them right now in single-sex groups, non-breeding groups, because we don't have a release project for them yet. So they all get a large grassy area, side enclosure, some tunnels, proper diet, vet care, and nice big pools to swim in. Yeah, we've got 7 large otter habitats. As you can see in the pictures here at the top of the screen and the bottom of the screen, they're pretty okay. And just to touch again on the government rescue centres here in Thailand are overcrowded, immensely overcrowded with unwanted pet otters. Okay, so just a few examples of our rescues. So I'm going to just present 2 of them. This is Oreo. He is a hairy-nosed otter, and when I got a phone call from a lady who had actually previously surrendered a gibbon to us 5 years prior and said, "I've got a hairy-nosed otter," I didn't believe her at first. I'm like, "Excuse me, we have never seen a hairy-nosed otter. Where did the hairy-nosed otter come from?" And she was very skeptical in giving much information, but it turns out he was purchased online 6 years prior to her surrendering him. And he'd been living with Bacon, his brother from another mother, who's a small-clawed otter. You can see in the picture at the top there. Just to point out, we didn't name these guys Oreo and Bacon. They came with those names. I wouldn't think I'd be choosing those names. Anyway, so he's now provided with refuge here at WFFT in a large, wonderful enclosure. It took him about 3 weeks to actually go into the large pool and start swimming, but is doing well, and it's very interesting to see the difference in even body movements and behavior in between the two species that we care for here, the Asian small-clawed and the hairy-nosed. This is another recent rescue, just late last year, Tungern. He was another pet. He had been confined to this makeshift wooden crate we can see in the picture here. Very unsanitary, dirty, old rice. He was being fed rice and sausage, if I remember correctly. That's clearly an unsuitable diet for an otter. And the owners got bored of him, or he bit them, and then they just put him in this box in the back garden. I think he'd been there for about 4 years. And then they decided to give us a call and basically say, okay, I'm ready to surrender my otter. And this is just 2 examples of where our otters come from, many varied backgrounds. Okay, a little bit of a different topic. I've titled this slide, Can Conservation Genetics Help Save Thailand's Wild Otters? Our previous presenter talked a lot, sorry, about conservation genetics in the UK. This is like a pilot project or a project in its infancy, which is being done by a university here in Thailand. February last year, they actually came and took DNA samples from 22 Asian small-clawed otters that we had here at the time, with the aim of identifying the origin of these otters. Basically, where in Thailand they were poached from, where did they originate from, to identify the populations and see which of those populations might be at risk of overharvesting or depletion of these otters if they are being taken from the wild, and also to help with the choice of future release sites. So if we hopefully would be taking part in release sites of our otters, we do have genetic profiling of them, which tells us where they came from. And interestingly, all of the 22 otters that were being housed by them, they found 4 DNA haplotypes, and all of them had originated from south of Chompon, which is about 4 hours south of here in Thailand. We do have small-clawed otters in various locations over the country, but all of our otters came from the Malay Peninsula, all 22 of them, which I find quite interesting. It shows that the trade is more prominent, I assume, the poaching, and then the trade is more prominent in the south. Another interesting point about the research that these guys are doing, they're doing a project in conjunction with a university in Japan, and they've actually been sharing some genetic sequences or haplotype samples with them, and they are finding that otters in cafes originate from Thailand. Some otters, some samples that they're taking, they're matching with the samples that they've taken here, proving that otters are being smuggled out of Thailand into Japan, which we all know anyway, right? Okay, so a little bit about our education. We don't have an education department here. It's basically me and some of the guys we have working on PR who try to do as much as we can. But here I've just put up an example of a sign we have for our visitors. We're not open to the public, but we have a day guest program where we have in between 20 and 50 people that come and do guided tours around WFFT. So they're always supervised. And we have a volunteer project where we welcome volunteers from all over the world. So we have these signs. The top one was here. Have you seen a pet on a pet otter on social media on our otter enclosures? So the visitors and the volunteers can read these, which obviously explains why we shouldn't be keeping otters and what to do if you see one on social media, and how to report it to the authorities here in Thailand. And these are done in Thai and English to provide our Thai visitors with some education as well. And then the species identification or the species information posts, as you see here at the bottom, are being worked on as we speak. We're actually looking at public awareness campaigns in DMP rescue centres, so the government rescue centres. We're hoping to share these things with them. And actually putting these in the government rescue centres to allow the people who visit these places to also learn and maybe think twice about liking a picture or sharing it, or even worse, buying a pet otter. So future education plans. We've had a wonderful volunteer who did some wonderful graphics, these digital illustrations of the 4 species we have here in Thailand. and we're going to hopefully use these in schools. We are planning, in the process of actually applying for funding, to do some work on illegal wildlife trade education in the local schools around here, and it's looking pretty positive. So in this year, we hope to start up an educational project, and we will be touching on otters on that as well. And then at the bottom, I've just put a gibbon poster. We have bilingual posters for many of the species we have here at WFFT. We haven't got around to the otters yet, but coming soon, we will have those posters at the bottom you see there, which will be otter specific. Okay, so a little bit of our hopes for the future, or my personal hopes, or what I dream. So well-researched and properly monitored rehab and release project for rescued otters, of which we don't have here in Thailand, or somebody's doing it very secretly and I know nothing about it. Again, we at WFFT and at the government rescue centres are inundated with ex-pet otters, and I do dream that we can properly get them rehabilitated and released back to the wild at some point. Better knowledge and a database of Thailand's captive otter population, of which I don't believe there is yet. Again, that would require collaboration with the NGOs, which is mostly us, who rescue otters, and the government rescue centres, so we can actually figure out how many otters are in captivity, particularly those that might be release candidates, and those that have been dumped from the trade. Improved welfare and husbandry practices for captive otters, particularly those at government facilities, and the creation of guidelines and regulations on animal welfare for zoos, government, and even NGO rescue centres, specifically for all wild animals, but specifically for otters. And then strengthening international cooperation on the sharing of information on illegal wildlife trade, and widening the networks of NGOs monitoring the trade and sharing information. Further on sharing information with the DMP's Wildlife Crime Intelligence Unit. And just to add to that, when we caught or saw the hairy-nosed otter being sold in Myanmar late last year, I was lost. I was quite stuck on what to do. I know it was only a Facebook post, and I literally couldn't find the right body or organisation to share with who could try and intercept that otter or help with it. And then on the last thing, so stricter enforcement by authorities on illegal possession and the trade of otters. Again, we're still seeing so many posts online. So many people here in Thailand post on a daily basis, walking their otters around on leads, putting them in dresses, doing stupid things. I saw one in a 7-Eleven hypermarket yesterday being walked on a lead. They're everywhere, basically, online. They are protected by the full force of the wildlife law. So I hope we can start actually improving the way that the otters are kept, and the confiscation of those otters, and then obviously the rehab and the housing of them. And then the thorough legal process and convictions of those people who have been keeping the otters needs to be followed through as well. We often see arrests or confiscations of animals here, not just otters. But it all gets a lot of big coverage in the media, and then it just goes very case, and criminal convictions are very, very rarely put through the full process, and people just walk away. So I do hope for an improvement of that in the future. Okay, that is my final slide. Thank you everybody for listening, and if you've got any questions, you can ask away now, or my email address and our website is at the bottom there.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom. Thanks for that, and following on from Lizzie's presentation, it kind of tied in quite nicely. Well, nice is maybe not the right word, but it tied in well. If you had to stop sharing your screen when you get a minute, that would be brilliant. Yeah, it was really interesting, and like Tom said, if anyone has any questions, just throw them in the two boxes at the bottom. I found it interesting about the hairy-nosed otter in Myanmar. What I'm assuming, sort of like cross-boundary transnational rescue is very difficult.
It's impossible, and the current very, very sad state of ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya people in Myanmar right now, it's really getting worse and worse and worse. And you guys, and I realized that in the UK when I was on holiday last year at home, it's not in the media at all, and hundreds of people are being killed every single month. I won't go on too much to that, but yeah, it's not so easy for us to go in there. It's near impossible to actually physically get in the country, and there aren't many organisations working on law enforcement or illegal wildlife trade. So yeah, it was a bit of a tricky one there.
I assume there was nothing you could do.
Yeah.
And in regards to, it was interesting that you said that all of your otters have come from effectively southern Thailand, which is a small area in comparison to the whole footprint of the country.
Correct. Correct.
Are they all from Thailand, or
Yes.
is it a possibility that they came from Malaysia?
No, they're all from Thailand, and it's 4 different provinces.
Okay.
Or at least the results from this project, they're stating that they came from 4 different provinces. So yeah, it's very interesting that they all came from Thailand, and it's also very interesting that they all came from southern Thailand in itself. Yeah.
There's a couple of questions for you. So Heidi Davis has asked, do the people who surrender a pet otter have to face any charges, or does it encourage them to surrender the animals because they don't have any further punishment?
So you've kind of answered your question there. Yeah, so we allow people to voluntarily hand over their animals to WFFT for a multitude of reasons, and one of them is because it will deter people from actually surrendering unwanted animals or pets or sharing information and things like that, if they think that as soon as they contact us, we'll be on the phone to the police. And it makes it better for the animal in the long run. We do, however, take the personal information and the identification card and all the information from these people that hand over the otters, that is then handed over to the authorities. Every single animal here at WFFT is legally registered with the authorities. So all animals in Thailand are actually, all protected species are all owned by Thailand as a country. So we're just an NGO here helping Thailand care for its animals, basically. So every week, any animal that comes through, any animal that dies, any animal that's been released, etc., it's all the information is given to the government.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance, isn't it, between trying to rescue the otters and trying to get that punishment? Because if there is the punishment, then you can't rescue them and help them. I guess that's it. Haley Robinson.
That's where the outputs of our illegal wildlife trade investigation team counteract that, I suppose, a little bit. The intel.
Haley Robinson has asked, what is your feeding routine for the otters, and what does their diet consist of at your centre?
Yeah, so our otters are, when they come to us, as I said, Tunga and the one in the presentation, he'd been fed sausage and rice. A lot of them are fed wet cat food or dry cat food, but yeah, literally many of them are fed rice. We here in Petcherbury, where we are, we find it difficult to source mollusks, and I've been advised numerous times that we should be feeding our otters mollusks, but they get fish. They get freshwater fish of various species, sometimes tilapia, carp, and other locally sourced fish. And we also give them, they get supplemented with boiled eggs once a week, and then sometimes we'll use various things for enrichments. They might get dried cat biscuits every now and again, and sometimes we will have shellfish and prawns and things to vary up the diet a little bit. But sorry, mostly fish 2 times a day. That's the easier answer, isn't it? Fish twice a day.
And when you receive the otters, you obviously, I imagine most of the time they're by themselves or rescued as single otters. How do they?
Yeah, not all of them actually. Jubbo and Jibby, who came in last year, they were together, and then Oreo and Bacon, they came in together.
And how do they integrate? When you cross them, are they socially kind of awkward, lack of a better word?
It's every single individual has different needs, really. Some of them are highly humanized and literally just want to rely on human contact all the time and completely ignore the other otters. And then some of them come in screaming and just want to rip your face off and are very happy to be introduced to otters again. But we do it. We have like special introduction areas where we have tunnels on the ground where we house them next to each other, and then we have a double door system, and then we slowly integrate. Yeah,
that makes sense. Well, Tom, thank you so much for your time and your presentation. I am going to move on to our next presenter. So thanks.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Our next presenter is Aurobindo Samal of Eco Earth Crusaders Otter Conservation. And he is going to be presenting on a challenge in Odisha's landscape and Indian aspect. A quick introduction to Aurobindo himself. So Aurobindo is a conservationist from Odisha, India. He is founder of Eco Earth Crusaders organization, a regional foundation that works for nature and wildlife conservation in Odisha. Mr. Samal carried out first conservation project on otters in Odisha, where he followed different methodologies to address the threats to otters and reviving the population, which was at the brink of extinction due to natural calamities, by involving local community members. He is currently serving as a member of IUCN SSE, the Otter Specialist Group. Aurobindo, I will pass over to you.
Hi, Ben. Hope you are doing well. And to all the panelists and the attendees, I would like to present my work, and I want to wish everyone a very good morning and very happy World Otter Day to everyone. So before starting the issues of Indian landscape, someone must be knowing about the issues. Just sorry, there were some rescued animals came to the center actually recently. So in India, the topic is very much broad. If I will start about talking about the otters in India, and particularly in Odisha, when I started working in Odisha, and especially on otters, people unable to understand if there is some species like otter even present. So before that, I will share my experience and the conservation practice and the conservation challenges in Odisha. I am sharing the PowerPoint presentation. Is it visible? Is the presentation visible, Ben?
Sorry, yeah, I was on mute. Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, done. So before starting the otters of Odisha and the conservation aspects is associated with it. So let's start from the distribution mapping to understand better the population of the otters in Odisha. So India is actually home to the three of the otter species out of 13 species of otters found around the world. So generally smooth-coated otter, Asian small-clawed otter, and Eurasian otter is found in India's landscape. So smooth-coated otter is one of the biggest otter species found in India generally, and Odisha is one of the state where all the three species of otters found in India is particularly present. So generally, I will not go through it, as already Tom has been told a lot of things about the threats to otters globally as pet trade, poachings, and this pet keeping for fish bycatch. Like in our, I will show you the maps later, very soon, that this is the costume of Bangladesh, which is a neighboring state and neighboring country to India, and neighboring country to Odisha as well. It is sharing its border with Odisha. So this is the Bangladesh people's personal experience. They used to keep pet otters for fishing them, and majorly they face a large number of losses because the otters they have kept for the purpose of business. The otters majorly consume the same fishes. So as you can see, I have showcased the map of Odisha in the Indian map. So you can see that how close it is to Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, and China as well. So it is one of the major gateway to the illegal traders also. So Odisha is falling in the Bay of Bengal, which is a 420-kilometer coastal stretch of the country. And generally what happens, Bay of Bengal have a large history of natural calamities, which brought light to me to work for the conservation of otters because of the natural calamities. The global threats to otter caused by the human greeds, of course, but in Odisha particularly, the threat is started for the natural calamities. So in short, if you will say that smooth coated otter, everyone knows that I will be starting from very grassroots level issues which will give light to everyone about the conflict, coexistence and conservation. So smooth coated otter is listed under vulnerable. Everyone knows that Wildlife Protection Act is actually the highest protection we provide to wildlife in India. So Wildlife Protection Act, in Wildlife Protection Act, the smooth coated otter is listed under Schedule 1. Schedule 1 means it is it is provided highest safety and security and highest protection to a species. So it is Wildlife Protection Act Schedule 1 species, and majorly these species properly lives near river, lakes, mangroves, paddy fields, estuary, ponds and wetlands. Why I am telling you these things? Because I am going to show you a distribution map of Odisha where these species are found. So if you can see, the distribution of smooth coated otter is very much high. Like if you can see the red dot marks, which is showing the population distribution is present in Odisha of smooth coated otter at these places. But kindly, if you try to locate, just can you find the Khordha district? If you will locate at the Khordha district, I can show you my map. If you can swamp the cursor on it, look at this map, particularly this location. Khordha is one of the place where all the species have been found already. Let me show you the other species also where we have located, and distribution map is already present. So Asian small clawed otter, it is also CITES Appendix 1 and Schedule 1 species, but it is its habitat preferences majorly belongs to river stream, hill stream, mangrove wetlands, seasonal swamps and estuary. It is a completely solitary species, Asian small clawed otter, while the smooth coated otter is a social animal, like they used to live in groups. So this is the distribution map of small clawed otter in Odisha. Kalahandi, this is the one of the district which is where we have reported one seizure of Asian small clawed otter skin, which is very much rare. That we have never reported any kind of otter fur, trade of otter fur or the poaching of otter fur due to trade aspects. Trade is very rare in Odisha particularly, but Odisha is sharing the landscape with the West Bengal. If you can see, West Bengal is the connecting way to Bangladesh, where once the species reach out to West Bangladesh through the West Bengal's border, at that time, no act of Wildlife Protection Act can be imposed on the traders. So it is the map of the places where the distribution of small clawed otter is found. So last is the Eurasian otter. This species is Appendix 1 as well, and the status is near threatened. And Wildlife Protection Act, it is also listed under Schedule 1. We have 5 schedules: Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, Schedule 4, and Schedule 5. The highest protection to an animal is given under Schedule 1. And this animal is also social. River, lakes, seasonal swamps, wetlands is the major preferable habitat these animals prefer. So these are the only 4 locations where we have found the species. But if you will see that Khordha is located here also. Khordha is the only hotspot. There also our office of our organization is also stationed in Khordha. So this is the one place where all the 3 species of otters found in Odisha, and where all the 3 species of otter present in India only. So it is a morphological order. I will not go through it as it is. It will take. I have very much time constraints on me. So let's start from otter conservation in India. So what happens majorly? Generally, what happens water conservation is 3 things we must understand, that we always forget 3 things. That I want to enlighten people on the conservation aspect who need to understand what is conservation challenges starts from. The challenges to wildlife, to anthropogenic pressures, the stresses. We have not started the war with animals and humans. Started somehow just because of few misunderstandings. Let me begin from the coexistence practice. So in India, every animal is worshipped, starting from a domesticated animal to wild animal, as every animal is associated with some of the shrines, deities who Hindu people or the religioustic people used to pray. So what is coexistence is, and what is conflict, and where it is started? Let me tell you first what is conflict. The basic of conflict you must know to understand what is where the conflict starts. So conflict is like once imagine you people all belong to a very sophisticated family and you are going somewhere to work. So on the first aspect, when if you have taken a rented apartment in 30th floor, and one day you watch a monkey is coming to watch you, look at you at the 30th floor. On the first aspect, we get excited that what a monkey came over all along 30 years, climbed along 30 floor to watch what is happening. Then that is what makes us excite, makes us curious. If when we find animals, it makes us curious to know why this monkey is climbing 30th floor to watch what is happening. Now on the next day, when we don't take any action, on the next day the monkey try to take some food from our home, and it makes us more curious and more astonished, that more surprised that they see the monkey is evoluting in such a way that an animal is trying to get through my get inside my room and trying to take some food. On the rest, what happens when someday you are getting late for your office and a species, the same monkey is came into your get into inside your house and eat your lunch box, which you forgot to take to which you forgot to carry with you along with you, and you see come to the upstairs and see that the monkey has already finished your lunch. And at that time, when you try to beat the monkey or try to kill or try to any kind of hamper the monkey, at that time the conflict occurs. That is what, when the tolerance of human beings breach between two species, that is where the conflict occurs first. Second is coexistence. Generally, once in India's aspect, if you will ask me, once upon a time when India used to be a very landscape of as British people say, India is a land of snake charmers and farmers. So every time people being very much living coexisting equally with the animals. But what happens when the forest department and the administration section launched the scheme of compensation, where people will be compensated for any wildlife loss, that breached the relation between the people and the animal. Every community people started thinking that species does not belong to us. It is the property of forest department. So it is responsibility of the forest department to take care of the animals. Take your animals and keep them away from us. So it is the general perspective of common Indian people right now about all the animal species found across the globe, across the India landscape. So let's start from the otter conservation in Odisha. So we will be starting with this video, particularly of smooth-coated otter, which found in the landscape of mangrove forest. So in generally, threats to otters is exactly natural calamities and retaliatory killing for net damages or human conflict. Pesticide contamination for fishing purposes. People use the majority of the fishermen who used to be we use fishing for the livelihood purposes, use the pesticides to kill animals and take the fishes with them to the market for local selling. But pesticide contamination is generally affecting the otters in the landscape. Pet keeping is one of the rarest of the cases, and poaching is also rare in Odisha aspect. But the majority threat is natural calamities, retaliatory killing for net damage, and human conflicts. So as I said about the coexistence aspect, why the coexistence has been breached between two animals is because the department has launched the scheme of compensation, and the compensation scheme has right now is a boon for the community people. Right now, the the local people are been so much greed towards getting the compensation amounts and compensation funds or compensation goods, that they are claiming more and more. In this process, the conflict is not ending; rather, the conflict between the species and the humans is increasing. So let's start over the conservation of otters in Odisha. So in May 3rd of 2019, the Balukand Wildlife Sanctuary faced a storm, a cyclone named as Fani, which means a snake hood, which occurred at the Balukand Wildlife Sanctuary of the Puri district. In Odisha, this is the first summer cyclone occurred after 20 years. So this was the scenario of the project location, our project location. Balukand Wildlife Sanctuary was the project location of our. So this is after the post-cyclone aftermaths of post-cyclones. These are the landscapes, wetlands, which has been damaged, particularly for the cyclones. So this it affected a lot to the entire landscape. But at that time, when we are doing the assessment of the losses of cyclone, we get to know that the otter population has been declined, dropped very drastically. Like they have not seen otters after for 3 months continuously after the cyclone have hit that place. So we started a project where we found that retaliatory killing is one of the major reasons. As you can see, a smooth-coated otter was killed for the purpose that it has to some nets, fishing nets, unintentionally while doing bycatch fishing, from the opportunistic fishing practices, from the nets, easy prey aspects. So this is the pet keeping of an otter I have reported somewhere, and later on the stage I got to know that the otter died because they have kept the otters all day in outside of the wetland, and the animal died. So how we sort out the issues, we'll be knowing this right now, as like what we have did to bring back the population of the otters from the local extinction. So we have concluded these six things which helped us bringing back the otter population as a practice to conservation. So generally we have take the help of community local supports. We have created local intelligence to grab the snarings and other issues, the other threats to otters. Along with that, to understand the species diversity study, we have also needing help of community, as community are the only people who are residing inside a habitat where they are crossing the paths of the species very regularly, more often. And also we have generally tried to create rapport building with both department and created a bridge between department and the community. So people perception study was carried out to understand what is the threat, what is the myth, what is the threat, and what is the perception of people towards the otters. So we can generally propose some kind of works and propose some kind of create some kind of materials for awareness, where their questions can be addressed properly. So later on stage, we started with methods and methodologies. We started surveying the 8 locations, and where PIV, pug impression pads, are also taken. If you want to know about pug impression pad, actually it is a process which was initiated by one of the forest officer of Odisha, who used plaster of Paris, the powder of plaster of Paris, to identify the individuals through the pug marks. Like everyone have their basic individual marks on their hand. Every animal have a basic handline marks on their hind limbs or front limbs. So this process usually helps to identify the individuals. Like PIP, I can show you that on the next slide also. So we took the different studies, science surveys, like identifying the holes, then scats analyses, and the pug marks also. Then on the basis of the science survey, we have conducted camera traps, including community people with the help of community peoples, and also sensitized about them, about the otters importance. As when we started the project, we got to know that the generation is unaware about the otter. They don't know. In Odisha, people generally don't know about if a or species named or like otter even present. So otter is very much underdog species in Odisha particularly. So we conducted few community sensitization programs among multiple villages to involve them in the community, and as a result, we received a large number of support from the communities to conduct anti-snare works, camera trappings, identification of holes, and massive changes in perception of about the otters, as they were thinking that otter is the only species in this place which is more than conserving any species, more than helping them. They have in fact there are many cases where people have killed the otters because of the net bycatch net damages. So this is one of the otters videos which we have taken from the phone. So in sensitization, as a part of sensitization, we have conducted few wall arts, including the local people, to create a small livelihood for them during this project, and involve them about the otters importance, and create a small rapport with people. So in the community places, in different community and public places, we have drawn some wall arts with the local people to help them gain some knowledge, gain some idea about the species, about their importance, about their habitats, about their diets and all. We involved students from 9 different schools. Around 300 students participated in the sensitization program, where they have been we have created some brainstorming sessions, activities, livelihood activities, and other brainstorming sessions to involve them about on the conservation and the topic of conservation. Then it is after the anti-snare work, we gave everyone a memento in the offices, like administrative offices, where they can still understand and make a species globally renowned. Like in Odisha, no one ever. In fact, if you will ask me today, I will remember that when I started this project, when I was at the divisional forest office, and the officer has been asking me which schedule of Wildlife Protection Act this animal is listed under, and what is the IUCN status. So this was the status of otters when I started working at this as a challenge. If you ask me about the conservation challenge, this was the challenge, that no one aware about otter, and no one aware about the IUCN status of the species. No one was aware about the Wildlife Protection Act schedules or anything else. So we have conducted several water tests after to identify the level of contamination in water bodies, and to aware them, and to make some pilot surveys and continuous departmental recce, as well as departmental pilot visit to the place to keep people little scared, so they will not add any contaminated things inside the water bodies. Like chlorophyllus is one of the major component which has been banned to be utilized as per the government of India, but somehow the chlorophyllus is utilized highly for the fishing of otters, fishing of for the fishing purposes, and to kill the otters particularly. And it is one of the, as I said, we right now in India, we are at a stage where we cannot stop compensations to the local communities. Right now, this war, we have not started this war, but we have somehow entered into the war zone. Like when previously, I remember when my grandfather was farm, we have few people working in our farms. At the time, my grandfather's mentality was like, if a elephant is coming and eating your grains, crops, at that time, just remember one thing, that it is your fortune that this animal is also needed to be saved, and we are doing harvesting foods for them also. But right now, after when the compensation, like government have many compensation schemes where government is providing basic amount for the losses to human being towards loss of crops due to crop rate of animal, or death of human lives, or any kind of losses, like if there is a breakage of house or anything else. In this process, what we are doing, we are completely differing animal from the humans, and we are making a long distance between the two species. Because once my grandfather used to say that this species belongs to us and this species needs to survive also. But right now, the mentality of people in India, in all over the India, not in just only Odisha, they know if we will have a loss of life or loss of damages of house or anything else, government is there to compensate us. So in general, this animals, all the animals are the properties of government, not us. They don't belong to us. So this is the breach of relation. So this is how to manage the threat to otters before the otters could regain their own space at this particular terrain where the population has already been depleted. At this stage, we have compensated few peoples with the fishing net to reduce the damages of the species, reduce the to solve the little chance of any retaliation possible. So in aspect to that, we have prepared many booklets on otters to understand the monitoring process and the conservation guidelines, to share these books with the administrative team to help them monitoring in the future aspect of the project. So generally, we have published 3 articles on the conservation of otters to make it a global sound, to let people understand that these otters are majorly basically belongs to us, and this how special Odisha is in the matter of otters, because otters are the only species, otter is the only species which is distributed in Odisha in all the regions, like all the regions, like all the 3 species of otters are present in Odisha. So in the result and outcomes, we have people now have right now when we go to the places, the otters have regained their own space. The conflict of snarings and the pesticide contaminations has been declined. People turned very much tolerant and learned coexistence right now. Zero report of otter casualty for pesticide contamination right now we have received. People generally, whenever I go to that place, people used to call me the Otterman. The Otterman have came. The students, the children, they used to shout that Otterman is coming. That is the thing for which we were working there, to let the otter come to the get the limelight. Particularly, even I would like to thank IOSF for the 2021 Community Achievement Award. And right now, after 2 successful years, when we a team of passionate conservationists and from the Indian Ministry, the central government, came to visit the site to know how the project become so much successful in this particular region. and we made them interact with the local common community people, and they also came to understand how the reduction of the poaching and the snaring and the threats related to the otters have declined in this space. And they were very much happy to know that we have got the fresh pug marks of otters during our field visit. Along with that, the community people from different places are visiting the our otter project site to know the behavior, know the perception of people on otters. They are enjoying their own space and coexisting equally. So on 2023 World Otter Day last year, we have celebrated World Otter Day for the first time in India. In India, particularly in Odisha, we have celebrated World Otter Day for the first time in association with the state forest department, like Odisha's wildlife headquarters, with the government of state government, and the government managed zoo, where we have conducted this program as a venue place among the International Otter Survival Fund as our funding agency, and the regional manager of natural history from the Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change of Government of India. In this particular program, almost 40 participants were joined this program from 10 different colleges and universities of Odisha, which was a very much satisfying job. But it was also more satisfying to know that people from different states, also different 13 states at least, joined this program of World Otter Day when we organized this event. So it is the normal Thanksgiving thing is there, and I wanted to know if there is any questions.
Thank you so much, Aurobindo. That was very informative, and you managed to cover a lot of different aspects of your work and otters in India and Odisha as well. So thank you so much. A couple of questions for you. So Anne has said it's really interesting that Eurasian otters, you've described them as social in this talk, and in India. She's gone on to say that she witnessed two different families kind of, and they didn't really cross each other, and a male also joined briefly, and we kind of see the same sort of thing in Scotland. So would you describe them as more social in India or in Odisha?
See, what we are losing in India is the practice of coexistence. We are also working in Gujarat also, but what we are losing is the coexistence practice. Like when, if you would you won't believe that once upon a time people used to live with the elephants. Elephants used to come to our landscapes, our agricultural fields, and otters are also. Otter is the only species which is not associated with any of the shrines, any of the deities.
Yeah.
Like in India, in every deity, every god have a mound as an animal. Like Lakshmi, the god of wealth, is associated with all. The Lord of Power, Lord Shiva, is associated with snake. So in this case, otter is not associated with any species. But in case of otters retaliation killing, why it is occurring is just because of people have lost the tolerance and lost the sense of accepting species, or accepting that we need to share this landscape. This is what we are posing into a major threat, right? Recently, if I will remember, when I was telling you about that a few days back, about we are working in Gujarat state of the Western India, where we have suddenly started the Otter project for the first time. But the thing is that we have reported one otter being traded there. So this is a threat that people are getting the ways to greed somehow.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a threat we are imposing that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
thank you. Heidi Davis doesn't have a question as such. She just wanted to say congratulations and what a success story. And
thank you very much.
She will keep in mind the murals and what a beautiful way to combine art and species conservation.
Yeah, absolutely. If they can mail me, or if there will be any questions there, they can mail me on my email ID. I will be sharing my email ID here for everyone on the chat box, so they can email me if there is any questions there.
Perfect. Thank you, Aurobindo, and thank you so much for your presentation and your time today. And if there's any
Most welcome.
following questions, then feel free to put them in the chat box, and Aurobindo can answer, or we can answer them at the end.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aurobindo. And now we pass on to our final presenter, who is Aleksey Oleynikov. Hopefully I pronounced that all right, Aleksey, who's going to present on otters in Kazakhstan, the current status, challenges and conservation projects. Aleksey's interest in otter research emerged during his university years. For over 20 years, he has conducted field zoological research in Northern Asia, focusing on the ecology of otters and other semi-aquatic predatory mammals. In 2013, Aleksey successfully defended his dissertation entitled Ecology and Biosynotic Relationships of Semi-Aquatic Mammals in the Sikhote-Alin Mountains. Hopefully, again, I pronounced that right. Since then, he has been an active member of IUCN Otter Specialist Group. Aleksey's primary areas of interest include population ecology and the conservation of predatory mammals. Since the beginning of 2023, he has been a research fellow at the Institute of Zoology of the Republic of Kazakhstan. Thank you, Aleksey. I'll pass it over to you.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Thank you all for joining this webinar dedicated to Otter Day. It's great to see so many dedicated people here to share their knowledge and to hear about both the success and the challenges in the water conservation. Today I will be presenting on the distribution and status of water in Kazakhstan. To begin, Kazakhstan is the largest landlocked country in the world, located at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. Kazakhstan's geography significantly influences the distribution of its wildlife. The waste steppes and deserts cover most of the country, limiting suitable habitats for otters. Several important rivers, such as the Irtysh and Iri rivers, run along the edge of the country. A unique feature of Kazakhstan is the scarcity of water resources. Water bodies are unevenly distributed, mostly found on the northern and southeastern regions. Effective water management is crucial due to the country's arid and semi-arid climate, which affects both human activities and wildlife. An example of the severe water scarcity issues in the region is the Aral Sea crisis. The Aral Sea, located on the border of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, was once of the fourth largest lake in the world. However, from 1960 to 2016, the Aral Sea's total area decreased ninefold. This drastic reduction exemplifies the severe environmental issues in the region. The crisis has had profound ecological, economic, and social impacts, highlighting the broader challenges faced by aquatic ecosystem in Kazakhstan, including those inhabited by otters. Historically, otters were found in the rivers that flowed into the Aral Sea, such as the Sirdarya and Amurdarya, but they have since disappeared from these areas. On this map, you can see the current representation of the distribution of Eurasian otter subspecies. The map is not entirely accurate in details, but it reflects the general geographic overview of the range. Kazakhstan is inhabited by two subspecies, the northern and the Central Asian otters, and their distribution do not overlap. These subspecies inhabit the basins of two transboundary rivers in Kazakhstan, which originated in China, the Irtysh River, and the Ili River. Now let's focus on the distribution and status of otter in Kazakhstan. The Eurasian otter inhabits two main regions in Kazakhstan. There are two subspecies. The northern subspecies found in the northeastern part of the country, specifically the Irtysh River basin. Despite its limited distribution, this subspecies is included in Kazakhstan list of hunting species. In early 2000s, the hunting quota was about 10 individuals per year, with an estimated population of 100 animals. Hunting quotas have recently been allocated and otter trapping is not practiced. The Central Asian otter inhabits the southeastern region, particularly the Ili River basin. The Central Asian otter is found in the southeastern part of Kazakhstan, particularly in Almaty and Jetesu regions. Its confirmed habitat is limited to the Ili River and its tributaries, confined by the high Tian Shan mountain range to the south. This subspecies has been listed in the Red Book of Kazakhstan as a declining species since 1978. The distribution of Eurasian otter in Kazakhstan has decreased by at least 60% since the 19th century. The main limiting factors include irrigation, destruction of riparian vegetation, and dam construction. Water pollution from mining, agriculture, and industrial activities also plays a significant role. In 2023, we conducted three trips to survey two sections of the Irtysh River as shown on the map. First section, Black Irtysh River, and second section, Irtysh River in Pavlodar region. During our surveys in the Black Irtysh River, we observed otter signs along all routes. The otter prefers river section with wooded banks, bays, and tributaries, avoiding open steppe areas and regions frequently visited by humans and livestock. Around 10 otters inhabit the area from the border with China to the confluence into Zaysan Lake. The section of Irtysh River in the Pavlodar Irtysh region was surveyed in March and October last year. We didn't find any sign of the water. Pavlodar region is characterized by higher human population density and industrial development. This region houses large enterprises in mining and metallurgy, contributing to an unfavorable ecological situation. For bioindication purposes, we assessed the population density of semi-aquatic mammals in two areas. At the Chorny Irtysh site, we used an integrated population density indicator for otters and American mink. Additionally, we analyzed otter scat collected for heavy metal content. In the future, we aim to compare heavy metal accumulation in two otter subspecies across two transboundary rivers. The latest published data on otter in Ili River indicate that weight distribution continued to decline. The primary threats to otter population in Kazakhstan include water use and flow regulation. Excessive water extraction for irrigation and industry significantly reduces water availability in rivers. Water pollution, contaminants from mining, agriculture, and industrial activities introduce fluorinated compounds, heavy metals, and untreated wastewater into otter habitats. Reduction in fish stocks and other prey. Overfishing and habitat degradation decrease the food supply for otters. Disturbance and direct persecution by humans. Human activities, including hunting and habitat encroachment, disrupt otter population. Otters often get caught and drowned in fishing equipment. Northern subspecies should be added to the Red Book of the Republic of Kazakhstan to ensure their protection. To ensure effective conservation, future research should focus on detailed population studies. We need to establish baseline data to monitor population trends over time. Impact assessment of human activities. It's important to evaluate how industrial and agricultural practices affect otter habitats, especially regarding water pollution. Long-term ecological studies. We should aim to understand how otters interact with their ecosystems over longer periods. Collaborative research with neighboring countries, especially on transboundary rivers, is also essential for a comprehensive approach. In conclusion, the Eurasian otter in Kazakhstan faces significant challenges due to environmental changes and human activities. The northern subspecies, despite being part of the hunting fauna, is not actively hunted now, but its distribution remains limited. The Central Asian otter is under threat due to habitat loss and water pollution. Comprehensive conservation efforts are essential to protect these subspecies and their habitats. Kazakhstan must prioritize otter conservation through research, policy, and community engagement to ensure this unique species thrive. Thank you for attention.
Thanks, Aleksey. Thank you for your presentation. It's interesting to see the different threats that a species that, or a similar species that we have here, the Eurasian otter, and the different threats it faces. In terms of, obviously, both the rivers that have or had otter populations on are originating in China. Do you think the water pollution is because of issues in Kazakhstan or potentially issues in neighboring countries?
When we started our research, we think it can be related to Chinese part of rivers, Odisha and Ili rivers. But our results show that Kazakhstan give more pollutants too, because many mining, many factories in near the Irtysh and Ili rivers.
Yeah, and
we need more knowledge about this situation.
Yeah. Michael Salami Oleynikov, who is based in Nigeria, he said, "Awesome presentation from all the presenters this morning." Sorry, he's asked, and I'll ask you, Aleksey, can citizen science be adopted for effective otter conservation in Kazakhstan? Sorry, did you understand the question?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I understand. Thank you for the question. First of all, in Kazakhstan, we have some large animals, very beautiful, and many people more like follow for snow leopard or bears or wolves or saiga, and not much people know about otters in Kazakhstan and interested in otters in Kazakhstan. And yes, we need to engage people and do more information. And I think people in Kazakhstan can be more interesting in water conservation and participate in some works for otter conservation.
Yeah, definitely. I think to follow on from your answer, it is something that we try as well, Salami, here in the UK and around the world. We're asking for citizens to put their sort of otter sightings into us so we can understand kind of where the distributions are, what potential threats there are. But it's also important to make sure that we understand that these sort of sightings that are given are verified. Quite often they can be misidentified for other animals, so getting photos can kind of clarify that for yourself. And I hope that answers your question. Feel free to send me, I know you messaged me already today, so feel free to send me a message about that and I can help you a little bit more. If anyone has any further questions for Aleksey, unfortunately, I received a message from Tom just 5 minutes ago saying we're having an incident with an elephant, so he had to disappear. And Aurobindo's also had some technological issues, so it's just myself and Aleksey. So if you have any questions for either of us before we end, then feel free to stick them in the chat and questions and answers box. But Aleksey, before we finish, I just wanted to say a big thank you to yourself for presenting today. And also for those of interest, Aleksey has also produced a paper in the latest IOSF journal, which will be out later on in the year, probably around mid to late summer. So if you have more interest in learning about Aleksey's work and the current status of otters in Kazakhstan, then you might be interested in this too. So thank you, Aleksey. Thank you for your time and for your presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing as there's no questions, I would just like to close the morning session of the webinar. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. I hope you all enjoyed the presentations that we were offered, and a massive thank you to Aleksey, Aurobindo, Tom, Lizzy and Sarah for their time on delivering presentations on a big variety of different aspects, from genes to distribution to pet trade to working with communities, all of which are the jigsaw that builds what we are all trying to achieve and why we're here today, and kind of the whole purpose of World Otter Day. For those that cannot or aren't joining us in the afternoon session or the evening session, I hope you enjoy World Otter Day. Hope you share all you can about otters and you enjoy kind of celebrating and raising awareness for their conservation and for the 13 different species we have across the world. For those that are joining us, we will see you in a few hours for 4 more presentations from otter conservationists and passionate otter lovers around the world. So I'll close this session. Thank you massively to all the speakers again and to you all for joining us this morning. Take care and have a happy World Otter Day.